Hello, fellow Movie Crusaders, and welcome to our latest episode of the Weekly Crusaders. My name is Sean Wassacrew. With me, as always, is Brian Michaels. And today we are talking about two movies that came out during the week of, and I don't know why I need to just write these down every time. The week of March 19th through the 25th. It's this week, guys. There we go. We are
talking about schedule. Yeah.
we are. Yes, we are back on schedule, and actually a little bit ahead of schedule. It's shocking. But we are talking about movies that came out during this week in movie history. Brian picked an animated film that I really love, and I picked a 2000s. It is a sex comedy, but it's also not a sex comedy at the same time. And yes, that's Brian and I were talking about this right before the show started. Is apparently Sean's got a trend that I keep picking sex comedies from the early 2000s that would not go fly by today's standards. And you know what? Here's a hint for next week. I'm doing it again. So deal with it, people. But today we are going to be talking about these two films. We're actually going to start with Brian's pick, and I did say that this movie actually has a very special, not a memory. It's like Inside Out, when like a core memory thing happens that like will stick with you and like lead you down a path. This movie is a core memory for me, and we are talking about 2007's TMNT. Yes, that's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but the actual title is TMNT. TMNT came out March 23rd, 2007, had a budget of $34 million, had a weekend opening of $24.26 million. It was first its opening weekend, its highest ranking, obviously. It only did the one weekend at number one, but had a finished box office of $95.8 million, $54.15 million domestic, and $41.65 million international. Turtles are obviously on the rise again. We got a movie coming out this summer with Seth Rogen, and isn't it Evan Goldberg, or is it just Seth Rogen?
I believe it's produced by Seth Rogen. I don't know if Evan's involved or not.
As I usually they're together and that, but that was a movie that I have been weirdly kind of like, I don't know if it's going to be good or not. And then we saw the first trailer, and I was like, all right, I'm hopeful for it. But shockingly enough, this is not my pick. This is Brian's pick, because of the 4 years I've known you now. Wow, 4 years.
Something like that.
Brian has notoriously always shit on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. You have, don't lie.
On the old movies, yes.
But and the Michael Bay-ish ones, even though he didn't direct them.
Not so much. Just kind of
Yeah, but he actually likes this one. And I always defend the first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the 90s one, because that one was actually really good. But I do agree, of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles films, TMNT is the best animated film. But this is Brian's film, so take it away, Brian.
Yeah, so Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, a little background here, is I mean, I actually enjoyed, I'd gotten a hold of like the old comics, they originally came from, which
the black and white ones?
Yeah, it's much darker. It wasn't really meant as like a kid's cartoon kind of thing.
They all wore red. They were all Raphael, basically.
So I knew them a little, mostly from that. Then they made like the movie. By the time they made the cartoons, which I thought were pretty cool. But the problem is, by the time they did that, I was kind of too old for where they were going with it. Like the movie came out in 1990, the first movie. That's the year I graduated high school. So I wasn't their target audience. Those first three Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movies are pretty awful.
The first one is not.
The first one is the least awful of the three, by far.
Not awful.
Still not good.
It's not awful.
It's mildly amusing. It's not like a Razzie-worthy movie or anything like that, but it's not good.
This one's not bad either. They just go real kiddie with it.
Yeah, and of course later on when they made the Michael Bay ones, they're watchable. They're fine. I don't love them. I don't hate them.
I still attest that the second one is the most Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie of all the Turtles films.
Of all the live action films.
Yes, of all the live actions. That one is the most TMNT of those live action films, to the point where I was like, this had potential to be fucking great, but the Turtles look so awful in those movies. I was like, if they just made them look like the original live action ones, like the Jim Henson ones, this movie would have been great. Like, you finally had Bebop Rocksteady, you finally had all them. Like, this actually can be great, but I just cannot get past the designs of the Turtles in that one.
Hey, gave Alan Ritchson a job. So
it did, but now he's Mr. Reacher, and he's going to be in Fast X. I mean, we can only love him as oh my god, Thad from Blue Mountain State for so long. He had to grow from that role. Which, if any of you have seen Blue Mountain State, check.
So, but honestly, most of my love of what I do love of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles came from the video game, both the Nintendo one and then the arcade, the one with like the side scroller.
Turtles in Time.
Yeah, I used to play those games endlessly. Those are just so much fun. I love those. And that obviously is based more on the cartoons.
That NES TMNT game was one of the hardest sons of bitches games I've ever played.
And it was, and that thing, and that same song that would play the entire time just gets stuck in your head for days.
The only thing I remember from the game, because it's been that long, obviously we're old, is when you're swimming in the sewers and you had to go up to those things and it looked like the turtles were humping it to try to deactivate it. Like, that's literally the only thing I remember from those games. But Turtles in Time, I lost so many quarters to those games.
Yeah. Sean, even watching Turtles and seeing things getting humped, between that and his sex comedies, Sean needs to get laid.
It's true.
Anyway, he's like, we're gonna edit that. No, we're not.
No, we're not.
But so this one came out in 2007, and I thought from the previews, I thought it looked pretty good. I really, really liked this movie. I liked both the story of it. I thought it was very fun. I thought it was faithful to the Turtles without being. It was animated, but it wasn't like a kiddie movie. It wasn't too silly and cartoonish.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like they tried to go too dark and alienate their audience by trying to say, oh no, we're dark and brooding. Because this came out. Well, I guess this came out right after Batman Begins, but before Dark Knight Rises, when all comic book movies had to be dark and brooding.
Mm-hmm.
But what I loved most about it actually was the animation style, because it's not like your Disney and your Pixar or your Illumination, things like that. It's kind of got its own kind of animation style to it, and it definitely has a darker look to it. And I just thought this was a lot of fun, and it looks great. The story of it, I'm just going to read a brief synopsis. After the defeat of their old arch nemesis, the Shredder, the Turtles have grown apart as a family. Struggling to keep them together, their rat sensei, Splinter, becomes worried when strange things begin to brew in New York City. That's the very basics of it. What I did like about this one is they did not just make another Shredder villain story, because that thing has been done to obviously
no, because this is actually the fourth film.
Yeah,
it is connected to the 3 live actions, because there's that one scene where Splinter goes to like his trophy room and you see Shredder's mask, you see the scepter from the horrendously third film. So it is the fourth one. So Shredder is.
I consider those Easter eggs, because I want to pretend that this isn't part of that.
It 100% is, and it makes more sense that the story is the way it is, because at this point, yeah, they would kind of go off their own ways.
Yeah. So at this point, one of them, is it Mikey? No, Donatello.
Donnie's an IT tech.
Yeah.
Leo goes off to South America.
Leo. Yeah.
To go and be like kind of like, I guess, like train more. Mikey is now basically a party clown dressed up
in a fake turtle's head to go play at parties.
Yeah, and
Raphael has become this vigilante of the night,
basically.
Yeah, what do they call it?
The Night Watcher? Is it Night Watcher?
Night Watcher, yeah.
Which is basically a mech, basically a metal turtle suit for the most part.
Essentially, he looks exactly like himself, just a metal version of it. As someone points out in the movie, it's like, you're not fooling anybody, dude.
There's an actual turtle toy. Oh god, it was a robot turtle. It was on the cartoons. I can't remember if it was Mech Turtle or Mecha Turtle or something like that. He basically looked like that with less color for the most part, which I'm fine with. Like, I thought it was really cool. But yeah, Mikey dressed as a turtle doing turtle parties, I thought was just brilliant. And Donnie being IT support, just getting yelled at by customers. Especially because around this time when it came out, I worked at Best Buy. And I was like, Donnie, I feel your pain, man. I feel you. Donnie.
Yeah, it's like they're kind of split up as a group. They're only doing their thing, except for Raphael, who's doing his night vigilante thing. And then the Patrick Stewart plays this man who basically is wants to get all these statues, and he ends up basically releasing these what are they? Demons, monsters, creatures? What do they call them?
They're monsters.
Yes, we have monsters, and that becomes basically the main villain, the main story of this movie. I love that they definitely have the perfect like family dynamic between the 4 turtles. like both in the ways they get along and the ways they argue and the problems they have with each other and the issues they deal with. I love the family dynamic. I think that Splinter was kind of barely used in this movie. I mean, he's got a little background character, but I mean that's kind of always been his thing. But also, I think the person that got to do the voice, Mako, whatever his name is, this was his last movie. He was not doing well, so I think they didn't have him do much for a reason. The other voices, I actually found was interesting because I didn't even know this when I watched the movie. Leonardo is James Arnold Taylor, who we mostly know from as the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi in Clone Wars.
Mm.
Raphael is Nolan North, who I believe is Uncharted, correct?
That is Mr. Nathan Drake.
Yes. Mikey Kelly, who does Michelangelo, I don't know him. Mitchell Whitfield is Donatello. I just know him as the guy who's not Ralph Macchio from My Cousin Vinny. He's like the other guy that gets caught stealing the tuna. So it's just and then of course Sarah Michelle. Their big names basically of the movie are Sarah Michelle Gellar as April O'Neil, Chris Evans, who does a great job as Casey Jones, and then Patrick Stewart plays Winters, who is the old man I was talking about.
Well, Lawrence Fishburne's also the narrator.
He's the narrator, yes.
And Ziyi Zhang, which we'll know from Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, Rush Hour 2, she's Karai.
Yeah, and she's one of those people who clearly English is not her first language, which I get, but it's like get somebody else to do the voice because you could tell she was struggling.
Karai's not supposed to be first like American either, so it's fine.
But she was struggling to read those lines. I don't think a flaw of the movie. I'm just like, eh.
Don't forget about Kevin Smith.
Well, he's got it's a cameo.
Yeah, he's a diner cook.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I just loved this movie because I think that this had finally found a good balance of the action, of the humor, without being stupid, without going over the top silly. So, what were your thoughts on it?
All right, so for me, I remember when this movie got announced, I was like, yes, but kind of also like, oh man, they're abandoning the live action to go back to cartoons. And I was kind of like bummed at that. But then as I was watching the movie, I realized, oh, this is a connective tissue to the original films. And then once I found out that this was technically part 4, the storylines all were kind of like, all right, yeah, this all makes sense. This all makes legitimate sense. The voice casting is great. The animation, I agree, is great. The action in the animated is great. Still to this day, one of my most favorite scene in any Turtles film, we all know what the scene is when Leo and Raph fight on the rooftop in the rain. Mm-hmm. I have watched just that scene countless times. The emotional impact of that scene, for me, that ranks up there, and a lot of people go, but if you're not a Turtle fan, you're not going to get it. The fight of Leo and Raph on that rooftop is the equivalent of Civil War when Cap and Iron Man fight. And it has that same kind of like, you don't want them to fight, but you really actually want to see who the hell is going to win this. Because this has been brewing since the comic books, since the video games, since the cartoons. Like, you're like, or no one's gonna stop them this time. There's no Donnie or Mikey or Splinter breaking up. Like, no, these two are really gonna fucking go. We're gonna find out who's gonna actually win this. And it was shot beautifully. The way the rain hits their skin in the animated looked beautiful. Hands down the best turtle scene to this day. We don't know what we're gonna get this summer. Hands down the best. But yeah, the whole Winters monster storyline, to me, if there is a weak link, it is that, because it does kind of get rushed through in the third act. I do think
the ending,
they could have done more with it. And I think that is one of the things that Turtles in general has always had issues with. Not the animated series, is because they have a lot of time to develop that stuff. That was one of the great things about and I've said this on the shows before, the Nickelodeon, I think it was 2011 or 2013 TMNT series, is that they were able to establish so many villains on that show that weren't Shredder or Krang, that you were fine if you didn't see Shredder or Krang on the show, because they had established a lot of good villains on that. The movies have not done that. The movies, it's Shredder or it's nothing. And the third movie, that's what hurts the third film, is because he just went back in time and no one gave a shit about the villains in that. And then in this movie, yes, you got Patrick Stewart, which is great, but the Winters character and the monsters, they just felt like monsters of the week kind of thing. Fun to watch, but not memorable.
When I felt like though that it was never the main story. I thought that's kind of the B story. It's like
No,
I thought the main story was the fracturing of the family and what
and
they were
then
doing, getting them back
coming
together. And
exactly.
then it was like the monsters was kind of the secondary thing that once they come together and fight that. But I agree they do rush through that. It needed a little bit more to it, but I still think it didn't hurt the movie that much for me just because I thought that was kind of the secondary story.
No, and then of course by the end of the film, they tagline with them saying that Shredder's still alive, which we're like, okay, but then we never got another film. Which
Yeah,
was
I wish
weird
we had
because
gotten more film.
it technically is a success. It was a success, but I think they just decided, hey, let's go back to just doing the shows, which is what they inevitably done basically until they did live action again in the 2010s with the Michael Bay ones. But yeah, like I said, this movie is a core memory for me, and the reason why is that I'm not saying that I still wouldn't have done it, but without this movie, you may not have been watching me today, because this is the first film to make me go, I need to be a reviewer. I need to be a critic, because and Brian, you know this story because I've told you this story. Back in 2007, yes, we had the internet and stuff like that. But I mean, I also still would check out the newspaper. And usually Friday morning or Thursday morning, I would check the newspaper and there would be the movie reviews on it from whatever critic the newspaper had at that time. And they reviewed Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And the guy did a 4-star system. And I had not seen TMNT yet. And I was excited to see it. And then I saw this guy's review. Or no, it was Friday morning. I saw it the night before. So I was excited to see if, it was like, oh, thank God, this was a great film. I can't wait to see what the reviews say. I opened the newspaper and I see this guy's review and he gave it 1.5 stars. And I was like, what? Why? Then I read this guy's review. This guy didn't know what Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was. He spent about 60% of this review talking about the audacity and believability of mutant teenage turtles knowing martial arts and not being able to buy in to the concept of what this movie was trying to sell. And I remember because I think I was 22 at the time reading this, and I was just getting angry reading this review because I was like, how do you not know who the Turtles are? The Turtles have been around since fucking like 85 or 84. It's like, how do you not know what this is? Why are you getting paid to review this movie? And I got so angry. And that was the day where it's like, if wrestling doesn't pay out and baseball doesn't pay out, I know what I'm going to do now. I'm going to do this because this is just absurd. And this person gets paid. And this person is considered a good movie critic. And he just did this. I was like, screw this guy. And that was when I started to kind of develop I was going to do a website and I was going to do reviews and all this kind of stuff. And had it not been for this dude's review that was just utter dog shit from this film, we may not be having this show right now. And so thank you, douchebag, who doesn't understand that Teenage Ninja Turtles at this point was already 23 years old in the world and acted like he'd never heard of it before, because without him, the Movie Crusaders would not be going on right now.
So depending on how you feel about us, you can also blame him.
Yes, praise or blame. The choice is yours. But yeah, like I said, this movie has a core memory for me because without that guy, I wouldn't be doing this.
Yeah, I knew even though it was my pick, I knew you'd probably have a lot more to say about it because you have a real connection to Turtles, whereas me, it's like more of tangential, except for this one. Yeah,
I do. I have the comic books. I have the toys. I obviously have watched the movies more times than I can count. I've literally wrote trivia matches for the Turtle films. I love these characters. I literally watched a Turtles movie last night. It wasn't this one. It was, and if you guys have not seen it, Batman versus the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle is flippin' amazing. It's awesome. And if you haven't seen it, find it You will not be disappointed because it is so damn good. And even Brian is like, yeah, that's a good
I like that one. I like that one.
But yeah, this is outside of the first one, because the first one, like I say, is such an important film to me, much like how Jurassic Park is, compared to the other sequels. This is probably the best overall film. Even though if I'm gonna watch one, I'm probably gonna watch the very, very first one because of how important it was to me in my childhood. But yeah, TMNT is a solid film. Chris Evans still was kind of coming up. He was Human Torch and stuff, but he hadn't. This was 3 years before Captain America.
3 years.
3 years. So he was still doing like rom-com Chris Evans, stuff like that. Sarah Michelle Gellar just got out of Buffy, so she wasn't really doing much. So when you saw them pop up, you're like, oh shit, we got actual names. And of course, Patrick Stewart's Patrick Stewart. So it was like, oh man, we actually got like real actors in this movie. Like, okay, like they're taking this seriously, and they did. And I loved the beginning story about the fractured relationships, because everything that happened makes total sense. Every character's journey for the four brothers makes 100% sense on where they are at the beginning of the film, and then them coming together by the end of this film. I love this movie. I think this movie's great, and I was shocked when you picked it, because at first when we were discussing it, you go TMNT, and I thought you were telling me you're taking TMNT, and I was like, no, I'm not taking it. And you go, no, I am. I go, what?
Yeah.
I was like, okay.
Well, it's one of those. I mean, I do love it, but it's also one of those that I feel is so underseen and underrated. Not enough people have either they haven't seen it, or they just like they don't give enough credit. And I really wish we had gotten more like sequels in this animation style and stuff like that, instead of, like you said, going back to live action or going back to TV shows. And it is what it is.
With this summer one coming out, a lot of it's going to depend on how good the movie is. But we've already said, based off the trailer, it's got a very Into the Spider-Verse kind of vibe to it, but still.
It feels like it maybe goes a little too childish for me, but it's cautious optimism still, though. I'm looking forward to it.
Michelangelo always has that tight fit of it, but to me, it also the way the trailer is, and I know we're now going off topic to another Turtles film. These ones seem even younger.
Yeah.
Than any
Especially the one has like a really little young voice. Yeah.
Yeah, we like Donnie. Yeah, Donnie sounds like a girl in this. But it to the point where I think like this is the youngest version of the Turtles we've ever gotten. So it being a little kitty makes sense based off of how I think they're going to be aged in this movie. They might be only 13 in this instead of like 16-year-olds like they probably are in the other films that we've seen. But yeah, TMNT is one of those movies that I feel like kids that were growing up who didn't watch the cartoons, which first off, you had a horrible childhood, but two, they probably saw a cartoon film and they're like, oh, I only want to watch the live action ones. I don't want to do cartoons. And they probably dismissed this. And the people that probably watched this and then were just fans of the live action was like, oh, this is not that it's too adult, because it's not. But they're probably like, oh, it's not super kiddie. Maybe the young kids aren't going to grab onto it as much as the live action ones were. Even though the first Turtles film is very dark. It's really a dark film for kids. But yeah, like it still made almost 100 mil. That's good. Now I think the reason why it maybe didn't get a sequel is that if you're only looking at domestic. No, it barely got to 54 mil, but worldwide it almost made 100 mil. That's almost 3 times its budget. So technically it made money. But of course, by the time they would have done this, Captain America was kicking off, so they would have had to recast probably Chris Evans. Like you said, the actor who played Splinter had passed, so
it's also made by a small animation company. It wasn't like one of the major studio ones, so.
Yeah, so I mean, it's one of those things where I was like, I would have loved to have seen a sequel for this franchise, but Turtles have now been redone. I think this one coming up, I think will be the 10th new adaptation of the Turtles. But that's the thing about Turtles, success rate wise, it's got about a 60% success rate on the adaptations. It doesn't always work. Sometimes you have to get used to it. But by the end of the day, it's still Turtles. And if you love the Turtles, you're going to love everything they do. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed this film. Was there anything else you wanted to add, since it is technically your movie, even though I
Nope.
kind of took over?
I knew you would, and I was okay with that. I was planning on it, actually.
Okay. All right. We're now going to go to my film, which is a 2000s sex comedy. And it is a much like oh no, that's on Cinemasochism. I was like, much like a film that we talked about earlier this year, where a person disguises themselves as something that they're not, like Soul Man. For anyone who hasn't watched Cinemasochism, that was our second episode.
Something like the second or third, yeah.
Second or third episode. We are talking about 2002's Sorority Boys. Sorority Boys came out March 22nd, 2002, had a budget of $12 million, had a weekend opening of $4.13 million. It was number 8 its opening weekend, its highest ranking, and had a finished box office of $12.52 million, $10.2 million domestic, and $2.32 million international. Yes, and for anyone who looks up movies that came out during this week in movie history, it was between this and Blade 2, and I chose this. I love Blade 2, everybody. I do. But I actually really enjoy this movie. This is one of those movies, and Brian and I will be talking about a film probably later this year when we figure out what time or date, which is 100 Girls. And this is much like 40 Days and 40 Nights for me as well, where is it the best movie? No, not by a long shot. But I really enjoy this movie. I think it's funny. Is it stupid in certain ways? Yes. Is there some bad acting in it? Yes. But do the leads and the plot and the jokes work for me? Absolutely. The main plot for Sorority Boys is you've got I'm not going to know the actual Latin terms for the fraternities. I'm just not. I know what the acronyms are. But you have House Cock, KOK. And it's basically the main guy's frat. You know, their whole main thing is to basically do one night stands, or ons, as they basically are calling it. And then basically when the girl leaves, they basically do like a walk of shame thing and take a picture of them and put them on the wall. So real classy dudes. And that's where our 3 leads are from. You got was it Barry Watson, which most people know him from Seventh Heaven. You got Harlan Williams, who people will know from like Half Baked and Rocket Man. And then you got Michael Rosenbaum. Michael Rosenbaum is known for one thing for the most part, and one thing only. And that is, to this day, is still the best Lex Luthor to ever play the role in Smallville. Yes, he is better than...
Nothing in Smallville was the best of anything. But anyway, move on.
Dude, Michael Rosenbaum was the best Lex Luthor. And so those 3 alone... Like, I never watched Seventh Heaven, and Harlan Williams is touch and go based on the film. But I was a huge Smallville fan. And when I saw that Michael Rosenbaum was going to be in a film, I was like, well, I gotta see what he's like outside of the Lex Luthor role. And then this is the movie it was. I was like, okay, I'm intrigued by this. And it's basically, they basically get framed for stealing money from the frat right before this big boat party. And they get kicked out of the frat, and they know that they've been set up, but they can't get back into their room to get the tape that would have shown them getting set up. But they also have no place to live right now because they got kicked out of the dorm. So they basically go to the dog sorority, aka the quote unquote ugly girls, dressed up like women to stay there for the night until they can come up with a plan to get back into the cock house and steal the tape back and basically show their you know, that they've been innocent the whole time. But obviously it takes longer than anticipated, and it's a journey of them having to basically kind of flip over on the opposite sex and kind of learn what it's like to be a woman at this college, with the way that they treated women before and all this kind of stuff, which you guys have seen this kind of movie before, but it's, you know, done this way with an R-rated comedy spin on it. But yeah, that's the general gist of this movie. And for me, it works because of the 3 leads. And like I said, Harlan Williams, take him or leave him. He either works well on like Half Baked, because you got like Dave Chappelle and all these people where he's not the main focal point, but he chimes in when needs to be. And then you have something like Rocket Man where he's the lead and it's like, dude, no, you're a horrifically bad actor. In this though, to me, this is my favorite performance of his. He perfectly fits really well in with Barry Watson and Michael Rosenbaum. He has these lines that just like these two are talking, and then he'll just come in with his like a zinger, and it's like that works. His facial expressions, because he's obviously the big oafy ugly one. It works for me. It made me laugh. Barry Watson shockingly looks really good as a female in this film. He's the pretty one out of this. Based off the three, come on, man. He has feminine features, or at least they put the makeup on him enough to make him look like he's got the.
So even Barry Watson's looking good to Sean. We need to. No,
Shut up. But obviously, most of these films, the lead, basically starts to hang out with the leader of the dogs, and who's not ugly at all, but she's like the feminist girl, and and because of that, she's got the target on her back, and of course he falls for her and stuff like that. But Michael Rosenbaum's character, who plays Adam, and it's he goes by Adina in the film. He's not. He's the cockmaster basically of this film. He's the one who nails all the women. What? KOK. He's the one who nails all the women. He's basically the guy who hooks up with all the chicks in the frat. And so now, though, he's not a very attractive female, and he's having to kind of learn what it's like to be treated as an ugly woman, and having to go through situations of what it's like to walk in heels, and having guys constantly hit on him that are unattractive, aka his like frat little brother, which to me was funny. And also because he plays football, having a fat ass, him having to deal with being called fat ass, and I just think it's funny. It works for me. There's a lot of funny moments in this movie. Is it a movie that I would go, hey, you guys want to see some great, watch this, compared to other films that came out in like 2002? No, but it's one of those that like I think I caught it on like Showtime or Cinemax one night when it came out, because I didn't watch this in theaters. I don't remember watching it in theaters, unless I might have, because I would have worked at the movie theater, so I probably did see it in theaters. But it's one of those I caught like 6 months down the road when it popped up on like Showtime Cinemax, watching it like at 12 o'clock at night. I was like, this is actually funny. And then it would always be on like every night, because you know how like they would do that, like they would show the same movies for like a week in a row, and I watched that movie like every night because I had nothing else better to do, and I just enjoyed the hell out of it. I have no idea what Brian thinks of this film. He had not seen this movie prior. It's very rare that I pick a movie that Brian's never seen, and it either works in my advantage or it's a rockadoodle, and it really does not work in my advantage. And I have to listen to him bitch. I have to listen to him bitch about it for 2 years, and counting. So I don't know whether he liked this or not. Part of me feels like this is right up his alley, but then the other part of me is going, man, he's probably gonna hate this. So Brian, your thoughts on Sorority Boys?
So I had never seen this movie. I mean, I'd heard of it, but I just never watched. I don't know why I never watched it. I just never got around to it. As far as the stars, but Barry Watson, I basically only knew from, because I never watched Seventh Heaven, so I knew him from Teaching Mrs. Tingle, and he was one of the poker players in the opening of Ocean's 11. That's what I know him from, basically, is all. Also,
for the record, I never watched Seventh Heaven either, but I knew who he was.
Right?
I know Jason Priestley's from 90210, but you didn't watch 90210.
Right. But so that's basically all I knew him from. Although to me, especially because of the timing of it too, I always thought him and Taylor Kitsch were like twins or something. They were like very similar looks to them. And
I always got him in the London Twins.
I could see that as well.
Those are the two that I always got them mixed up.
Michael Rosenbaum, I've never been a big fan of. I don't have anything against him. I'm just never a big fan of his. The best thing he ever did was a TV show called Breaking In with Christian Slater. But
he was good in that. He was.
No one else but Sean and me have seen that show, so it doesn't matter.
Yes.
And Harlan Williams, like you, I know him from supporting roles in Dumb and Dumber is where I mostly know him from. Half Baked, Employee of the Month, things like that. I've never seen him in a major role really in a movie,
except Rocket Man.
I never saw Rocket Man.
Oh, you know, good. Don't. that could very well be on Cinemasochism.
Oh God. No.
Oh yeah.
Did we change this week's Cinemasochism movie?
No. This week's was Taming the T-Rex.
Oh, because I thought that's why you had me watch Sorority Boys, because this movie was dog shit. Yeah, I mean, dog shit might be a little tough on it, but it was not good. It was not funny. I think I know why I never watched it before. It's like, first of all, the whole thing of the cross-dressing people, especially when they're supposedly fooling like even the people who like lived with them. None of them, every single one of them, get recognized minute one. Hey, you're this dude, but in drag.
Hey, Harlan's character looked exactly like the founder of the dog.
And they
frat,
never explain.
sorority.
I figured that's gonna come into play later. Like it turns out to be his
Well,
great
the
grandmother or
main
something.
girl did look up and go, "What?"
But it never was explained. It's just like, oh, he just happens to look at this person. I thought they were setting the seeds for something to come later on, but nope,
They
that just
didn't
gets
need
thrown
to.
aside.
They didn't need to.
But yeah, I mean, but every single one of them looks completely recognizable. It's just them just in women's clothing, and they're not
You
gonna
gotta
fool
you
anybody.
gotta remember this. At least for the dogs, the girls, they never interacted with the frat at all.
But all the
So,
guys though.
well, you gotta remember they didn't really mess with the guys
And
that
then
much.
when the main girl starts basically like working with him on, you know, one-to-one on project, she's in the class with her every day and they're working on their project or whatever, and she doesn't make the connection.
But yes, but you also gotta remember that I'm gonna have to defend this movie.
You are gonna have to spend this movie.
Barely does she ever make eye contact with him because she just knows that he's a frat guy and she wants nothing to do with him. But
Yeah,
when they're
and
going
then
home,
first of all, the first time you meet that character, it's like she's being the protest against the, you know, the boy. It's like, okay, well, she's clearly gonna fall in love with him. You know that's going, but that's just every movie. It just follows a
yeah, it's every
formula.
movie. It's typecast at that point.
The whole the cock and dog as a sororities and fraternity, it's like that's stupid as shit, but fine, I'll overlook that.
Okay, Revenge of the Nerds. You could go all that stuff. That's
Look, lambda is not doesn't spell out dog or
no, but like
cock.
House Bunny did the same shit. It's like every college frat sex rom com in the 90s and 2000s had one of those kind of names.
Yeah. The first thing that caught me though, I'm watching the movie, and the first thing I caught that I was like, oh, I'm gonna hate this movie. The one kid who's like the president of their
I know. Yeah, he's horror. He's
his
god awful.
he's putting on this stupid ass voice
Yes,
for
he's
no
god
reason.
awful.
Like it's like he's in some kind of like, you know, Saturday Night Live sketch. He's just doing this dumb voice.
It's Brad Bayer who plays Spence, and
And he
yes, he's
keeps doing it the
gross.
entire movie. I'm just like, oh my God, please stop trying
And
to do this voice. You're not funny. You're just coming
his
across.
hair,
Yeah, and his hair looked
his
like, you
hair.
know, what's that cartoon character? Johnny Suede? No,
No, Johnny Bravo.
Johnny Bravo.
Johnny
Yeah,
Bravo.
Johnny Bravo hair. The dogs, honestly, half the girls in Dog were cuter than half the girls in their popular
Yeah, they
sorority.
weren't that bad. Like the French girls, like all she had to do was shave. She
Yeah,
was fine.
and the girl who was like supposedly so tall,
The
so
Lurch.
like, she was cute. I liked
Yeah,
her.
yeah, she was fine. But that's always how it is though. Because even with the house party girls, like Emma Stone was considered the ugly one in House Bunny. And it's like, no, because you still have to make it believable that these people will be with, you know, they'll hook up with people at the end of the movie. Because, like, yeah, I mean, no, none of them are really like, unless they like try to focus on one that really is ugly, so that way they can prove it. But you like look past every like the main group, and you look behind, like those are all recently average.
That's just it. It's I not understand, especially like with the whole thing of, you know, being able to be recognizable, things like that. Those are the kind of things you just got to overlook in a movie like this. And yes, I was exaggerating for the joke as far as saying a cinemasochism movie. This is not a cinemasochism movie. I didn't. It's not completely awful. It's just I just could not get into this movie. I didn't enjoy it that much. Honestly, at one point I'm like, okay, it's time for a time check. I looked, I'm like, oh God, I'm only 30 minutes into this movie. I still have 2/3 of this movie left to watch. Um uh
I would say you didn't like this part, but I already know that you're gonna hate everything I bring up, so it's fine.
this
But
part.
no, every time I go, what about this part? You're like, no, that was stupid. So I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna bring up parts that I thought were funny
Okay.
and go, you didn't find this funny because I already know you're gonna knock it down.
Well, because like I said, I didn't enjoy this movie. I'm not going to pretend I did, but I'm also not going to slam anybody who did enjoy it. I mean, this is another one that, like you said, probably wouldn't get made today. I mean, there's a whole section of it where it's funny because they're roofing each other. That wouldn't go over today. Although apparently it's funny and okay if a woman does it to a guy, but if a guy's to a woman, it's not. Anyway,
That's a whole other thing.
that's a whole other thing.
Or you know, basically take over the mind of another dude, aka Wonder Woman. It'd totally be okay with it in there. But no, I thought it was hilarious when they were having the dildo fight. And freaking Rosenbaum's doing like a full on like fence position with a giant dildo. Oh, dude,
It would have been better if they weren't it wasn't so stiffly choreographed. It looks like two kids doing their own YouTube video, you know, trying to do this fight.
Whatever.
I don't know,
I thought the football game was fun.
Although if there are no rules in this game where you can just punch and kick and elbow drop people,
I don't think that ref was an actual ref. It was probably like a teacher or whatever, and they just didn't care.
I hope not, because he assaulted the ref at the end of it.
He didn't assault the ref. The giant, she bumped into him, basically.
He was chasing down, then knocked him over.
Exactly. But I mean, come on. Like, they were doing full on, like, elbow drops and
But
kicks.
clearly they were trying to like, position themselves as the next great, cross-dressing comedy, because they had cameos from the only two people they could get from Bosom Buddies. They had Peter Scolari, who was the one guy that wasn't Tom Hanks, and then they had Wendy Jo Sperber, who was like she was the teacher of the feminine class. She was one of the main female roles in Bosom Buddies. Then they had like 4 cameos of people from Animal House. It's like, okay, clearly you guys are just trying to, put yourself up there with these classic ones, and it's like, not so much.
I think it works for me for what it was. Like I said, it's not an all-timer for me. And yes, a lot of people are like, "Why you should have talked about Blade 2." But you know what? Brian doesn't like Blade 2 either. So you don't.
Well, I think I watched it once, and I was actually going to give it a second shot, but then you didn't let me. So
No. But it's I saw this and I was like, man, I remember enjoying this movie. I want to see if it still holds up. But if it hadn't, I wasn't gonna pick it. And I was gonna pick Blade 2. But then I was like, I'm having a fun time watching this. I watched this at like 2 a.m. one night, and I was laughing. I think Michael Rosenbaum's got some great facial expressions throughout this. There's certain scenes where he's getting excited because he found the right size dress for him. It worked for me. But once again, I like Michael Rosenbaum from Smallville. You don't have that attachment to him. It's no different than you finding someone that you really enjoy and only you enjoy, and then he gets put in a comedy and you're like, yes, he's in a movie. You're gonna feel a little different.
I agree. Yeah.
But yeah, no, and yes, that President Kid was atrocious throughout the film. And the whole time I'm watching, I'm going, this is gonna be the thing that's gonna make Brian not like this. Is like
and the problem is it was like the first scene of the movie, basically, too.
It is the first scene of the movie. And I was just like, if there's gonna be a character that's gonna break this for Brian, it's gonna be this, and then it's gonna be downhill unless these jokes end up working. And apparently the jokes didn't work for Brian, but they worked for me. So if you guys like a cross-dressing comedy that's a college sex comedy, knowing obviously what the level is for the humor, you might enjoy checking this out. If you're obviously looking for a higher caliber comedy, then yeah, obviously you're not going to like this. But I thought this was right down Brian's lane. Like I said, every time I think I find a comedy that's right in Brian's wheelhouse, I swing and miss every time. But Brian's not perfect either. He made me watch some real stinkers during Weekly Crusaders.
Everything I made you watch is great.
See, I'm willing to admit that the movies might not be good, but he's like, oh yeah, no, Ravenous was fantastic. And freaking The Vanishing was incredible. And it's like,
okay, that was
under the rainbow.
Under the Rainbow was good. Vanishing, I'll admit, was not great. And there was another one which I can't remember which on second viewing was not so good. But
yeah, no.
Oh, well.
Anyway, we hope you guys enjoyed this episode of the Weekly Crusaders. If you guys did, go ahead and hit that like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you guys stay up to date with all the latest videos pop up on the Movie Crusaders. And of course, you can follow us on all the social media outlets you see below. Coming up next, we just dropped our episode of Cinemasochism. It is Tammy and the T-Rex, and boy, was that a fun show. I was editing it and I was still laughing at Brian and I throughout that episode. That was a fun episode to shoot. Movie review wise, we got John Wick 4 coming out, chapter 4, coming out this week. So we will have a review for that. We'll have next week, we'll have Cinemasochism again. It's going to be a movie that's very similar to a movie that's coming out next week. I won't say what it is.
Because not similar at all. But yeah.
And what?
But not similar at all, honestly.
Similar by title alone.
Yes, by title
basically.
Alone.
And other than that, not much else. But we'll be back again for another episode of the Weekly Crusaders, where, like I said, my hint is that it's another sex comedy from the early 2000s. That was more of an indie film. I don't think it ever really got released in theaters. And Brian, go ahead and go with your hint for your film next week.
I did see your film in theaters, by the way.
All right.
Yeah, it was out for like a week. Mine's kind of a cult classic sci-fi comedy, also based on a comic book.
Nice. And this could be literally the tables could be turned next week, where he makes me watch. I'm like, dude, this movie was shit.
Oh, I'm fully prepared for Sean to hate my movie.
Yes. So be around for next week for that. We'll see exactly what we think of both those movies. Actually, I know Brian likes my movie, so we should be fine on my end. It's his movie that might be in question. But until next time, we are the Movie Crusaders. I'm Sean Wasserkrupp. That's Brian Michaels. And until next time, in case we don't see you, go watch the movies and go have some fun.
you're still here. It's over. Go home.